our session this hour is Rewriting the Science of Wolves, the top 10 things we've learned about wolves. And our speaker today is Shauna Baron. Shauna Baron holds a BS in biology and an MS in science education. In her early years, her studies focused on large and small carnivores, including wolves, bears, fishers, and bobcats. Shauna saw her first wild wolf while volunteering as a biotechnician for the Yellowstone Wolf Project in 1996, and she's been working to protect wild wolves ever since. Her career is focused on predator conservation. Today, she's working as a naturalist guide in Yellowstone National Park, where she continues to share her love and in-depth knowledge of the natural world with both students, young and old. Shauna, we really appreciate you being here today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
And we can't wait to hear what you have to say about wolves.
Great. Are we ready to go?
We are.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. As Karen mentioned, I live right here in Yellowstone National Park. And my job today is to take all the science that researchers are collecting on Yellowstone wolves and hopefully spit it back out in English to folks like yourselves. So today I'm just going to share a few of the highlights that we've learned about wolves over the past 25 years. I can't share everything in this amount of time, but I thought I would pick out a few of the best and kind of some of the more unique things to share with you today. So let's make sure it's going to switch. Yay! All right, so we've had a pretty tough history with wolves. Through misconceptions and predator control programs, wolves were completely eradicated from Yellowstone by 1926. 70 years without wolves, and finally the stars aligned to have a recovery program occur in 1995. Wolves were brought back both to Yellowstone and Idaho and have since established themselves throughout much of the Rockies. And we're going to talk primarily today about what is going on with Yellowstone wolves and what life is like after they were gone for 70 years and have finally made a comeback. And boy, have they made a comeback. Hands down, Yellowstone is the best place in the world to see a wild wolf. There is no place else in the world where typically someone sees a wolf every single day in the wild here in Yellowstone. And so a whole tourism industry has been, of course, created to go out there and watch wolves. This is a typical day where the only spot to view them from happened to be on one hill. So everybody was stuck together on that same hill looking for wolves. With all of the observation data that we have, there's hundreds of research projects going on throughout the park, and we've learned a lot about wild wolves over the years. Most of the information we had on wolves prior to the recovery program came from captive wolves, and captive wolves don't behave the same as wild wolves. So I'm going to share a few of those highlights today. Most of the information that we get, of course, and most of the information I'm going to share today comes from researchers like my friend Kira, who donated most of these slides for us to use today. And she's out there every day with some of the other biotechs, observing wolves and taking information and questioning what we thought we knew about these animals. My job, of course, as I said earlier, is to hopefully spit it back out in English. First of all, right, we all know a wolf pack is a family. Wolves live in a pretty interesting and complicated family system. They, of course, communicate through an intricate system of howls and body language, all of which establishes their social bonds. And of course, it establishes their hierarchy amongst pack members. And that can actually start at a really young age. Puppies that come out of the den, some will come out with their tails up, acting all dominant. Others will come out of the den with their tails down and acting submissive. They are, of course, establishing those strong family bonds. They will defend each other. They will mourn when they lose a pack member, just like we do. And they will sometimes actually put themselves at risk in order to save a family member. Their vocalizations are highly intricate, and they actually speak about 21 different dialects all across the world. So I like to think that wolves have accents just like we do. I was talking with James earlier, and I picked up, of course, on the accent from the north. And wolves have accents across the world. They tend to, of course, form lifelong pair bonds with their partners, and they avoid inbreeding. Um, there seems to be, and of course, there's still research going on about this, about how wolves tell each other apart. They're looking into things like kinship and really how do wolves know each other. And one of the things that we've learned is that they avoid inbreeding. It's very, very rare to see close relatives actually breed together. And there seems to be a taboo that exists against inbreeding. A female growing up in a pack of wolves with an unrelated male, even though she could breed with him when she becomes an adult, she will typically avoid breeding with that male that she's known for her entire life. A social bond seems to develop when they're very, very young. And so when they become adults, or she becomes an adult and is still around this unrelated male, if he acts interested in her at all, you may see an event similar to what is on the right-hand side of the screen, where a female is giving a male who is kind of paying attention to her and she does not appreciate his advances, she's given him an earful. So those females will actually be quite aggressive with a male that she is not interested in. The image on the left of the two butts is what we call parallel walking. When pair bonds form between two individuals, every breeding season, which happens in the winter, they will reestablish their bond and kind of show off for the rest of the pack that, yes, this is my boy, or yes, this is my girl. And they will walk in what is known as parallel walking. So they'll walk side by side, shoulder to shoulder, and they'll often match their steps, step for step. It's almost as if they're holding hands, and they will do this every year, reestablishing that pair bond over and over again for years and years to come. And so we see this kind of behaviors play out every breeding season with these males and females as they begin flirting with each other, and the courting season begins again each year. And that usually starts in January. Even though we've had, of course, 25 years of wolves here in the park, and only 41 founding members for our population here in Yellowstone, we still have an inbreeding coefficient that is below 0. And that is projected to remain so for years and years to come, as long as nothing crazy happens with either the food supply or disease or something gets in with the wolf population and removes individuals. Our inbreeding coefficient should still remain very, very low. And we've learned something interesting. Boys can come and go from pack to pack. Girls have a harder time. We have seen in the Yellowstone ecosystem and throughout most of the Rockies that male wolves are tolerated between two different packs. They can often leave their natal pack and then go flirt with the girls from a neighboring pack and be perfectly accepted as long as they submit to the dominant male of that neighboring pack. They go back and forth all the time. Females tend to be a bit harder on each other, and we have only seen an unrelated female join a pack that did not have any cousins or sisters or any wolf in it that she knew, less than about 5 times in 25 years. But male wolves come and go. So these big, beautiful wolves, like the Wolf 302 on the screen, who's known as the Casanova wolf. He's in most of our recent wolf movies about Yellowstone wolves. When a wolf like 302 shows up on a hillside howling, oftentimes what we see is these younger females of the pack will run off with this boy. And they'll spend about a week or two with these Joe from across the tracks. They'll get pregnant often. They may even try to set up their own territory, but it is very, very difficult to set up a new pack territory in a place like Yellowstone that is full of wolves. Most of our territories are full. The really good year-round hunting places are full. We tend to have about 10 of those really great year-round hunting territories, which corresponds to about 10 packs on average here in Yellowstone. And so these girls usually figure it out pretty quickly that it's really hard to make a living on your own and try to eke out living out there, or to try to carve out a piece of territory in a place that is full of enemies. So they come home, and we often wind up with multiple breeding females in one pack. So contrary to popular belief, the alpha pair is not the only wolves in the pack that breed. Often what we see is those young girls get pregnant, come home, they raise their pups at home with the rest of the pack, and the entire pack will help care for them. Now, most of the pack know who the dominant female's puppies are in the pack, and they will often give more care and attention to that dominant female's pups. So the dominant female's puppies tend to have higher survival rates. But all of the pack will help to raise all the pups, even a subordinate female's puppies, although she may not get as much support from the pack members as a dominant female will. Now, all of these multiple breeding females lead to an interesting pack structure inside places that are protected, like Yellowstone. We get multiple generational packs. So we get adults, 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds, pups of the year, pretty much every year in our packs. They are filled with multiple age classes. Outside of a place like Yellowstone that is completely protected for the most part, of course, it will stay inside the park. Outside of the park, where human mortality is pretty much the #1 cause of death for wolves, our pack sizes are smaller in places like Wyoming and Montana, in Idaho, and you don't typically see multiple generations in one pack. You usually see mom, dad, and kids of the year. So Yellowstone is fairly unique. These protected habitats create long generations, multiple generations, and often fairly large pack sizes if food supplies are readily available. And so living in a pack is really important if you're going to hunt something that is 6 to 20 times your size. The major prey here for most of our animals in the park is elk, although some of our packs have learned to specialize in hunting bison. Those packs that hunt bison typically have bison readily available in their territory, or they're a pack that basically only has bison available to eat in the winter time when elk have completely migrated out of their territory. So out of desperation, they've had to learn how to hunt something 20 times their size. So if you're gonna basically hunt something that's a lot larger than you, I always like to attribute it to, you're not gonna walk into a bar and pick a fight with the biggest guy in the bar, right? You're gonna look for something that's a little bit weaker. And so the elk are hunting typically older animals, sick, weak, young animals. When they're hunting adults, wolves tend to hunt an average age elk that is about 14 years of age, so well past its breeding prime. And they actually have a shift in what they hunt throughout the year. Researchers have figured out that in early winter, wolves are typically hunting cow elk. And then by late March, it's almost like someone flipped a switch, and they begin hunting bulls throughout late March, when bulls are the weakest over the course of the winter. Their bodies, of course, are breaking down whatever protein and fat they built up during the summer months, and they become weaker and weaker as winter progresses. And so we actually see wolves shift from cows to bulls over the course of the winter. Selecting out the weakest animals of the herd, of course, is leading to a better fitness overall for most of our herd. I like to think that they are actually building a leaner, meaner herd over time. And we've seen both wolves and elk populations come into a fairly stable population demographic for almost a decade now. Both populations have been very healthy and very stable. So how do you hunt something that is 20 times your size? In the case of an elk, it's about 6 times the size of an average wolf. If you're hunting bison, it's 20. You need to have a strict division of labor. And through research here in the park, and through observations, of course, we've been able to figure out that everyone has a job to do. The pack actually breaks up specifically into certain tasks when they are hunting. Often when you see a hunt play out, we will see the females of the pack or younger males will do the sifting and sorting. They're the ones that are doing the running. They're faster, they're lighter. And so they can get an elk moving. They will do a lot of the chasing. And then Typically an older, a little bit more experienced wolf will move in to grab onto the back leg, or in this case, right on the shoulder, to try to slow that animal down. And then you'll see some of the larger animals, often a big female or a really big male of the pack, in this case, a beta male, is coming in from the side, almost like he's been running the sidelines the whole time. He'll come in from off of the sidelines, run in, jump all 4 feet off the ground, grab a hold of an elk's neck, and suffocate that animal within about 3 minutes. So an elk hunt, once they get a hold of an elk, typically happens fairly quickly, and the animal dies quite fast within about 3 minutes. But when they're hunting bison, they can't do that. The structural development and the actual physical structure of a bison makes it almost impossible for wolves to actually suffocate a bison. So what wolves wind up doing is they come in, and if they can get a hold of that animal, they will cut into really vital areas like a hamstring, trying to get to a femoral artery, cutting into the underbelly, and they basically bleed that animal out. And it's gruesome to watch. It's not pretty. Elk hunts are pretty fast and clean. A bison hunt takes 12 to 14 hours to kill a bison on average. And hunting both elk and bison, of course, is extremely dangerous, not only for, of course, the elk and the bison, but also for the wolves themselves. They get kicked in the head, they get crushed, they get tossed in the air. So they have to be very careful in what they're selecting. So they do a lot of work ahead of time to try to figure out, is that animal worth the risk to take it down? So you can bet they are looking for something weak. So not only do they have to worry about their food killing them, and by worry about getting kicked in the head, the #1 cause of death for a wolf in the wild, in protected habitats, not outside of the park, the #1 cause of death for wolves inside the park is actually another wolf killing them. Wolves fight like street gangs. They're not hunting each other, but they are basically killing each other for the right to hunt in those really good hunting areas. As I mentioned earlier, there's only 10 really good year-round hunting areas, and all of those territories are full of wolves. And so the hunting territories tend to overlap seasonally. Wolves come into contact with each other pretty often. And if those interactions result in actually coming to physical blows, often it results in death of one of those pack members. Outside of Yellowstone, we tend to, of course, see human mortality as the #1 cause of death. But inside the park, wolves are actually controlling their own population. And so when the Montagues and the Capulets have a showdown here in the park, we've actually been able to figure out through years of observation, Kira actually put together this data, figuring out who wins a fight and why. And there's a number of factors that play into this. One of which is pack size, right? If you outnumber your enemy, you're probably going to be able to win that fight that day. So having even just one more wolf than the enemy pack will help you to win a fight. They can count. Wolves can visually see how many enemies are standing on a hillside. They can distinctively make out how many individual voices they're hearing when they're howling. Typically, wolf packs will settle these disputes through howling, right? They don't want to get hurt. They don't really want to get in a fight. And so they will howl back and forth to each other. In open country, they can hear each other 10 miles away. In, of course, wooded habitats, they can hear each other about 5 miles. And so we're not really sure what they're saying to each other or if they're talking smack about each other's mamas, but they're definitely saying something. And oftentimes we'll see the smaller pack will move off and move out of the area simply because they're hearing more voices than they have in their own pack. And so having one more pack member is really, really important. Also, age matters. So it seems like, and of course with Kira's research, she's been able to demonstrate that it's not only important to have one more wolf than your enemy pack, it's also really more important to have one more wolf in your pack that is over 6 years of age than the enemy pack has. And so these older wolves, although they may not be really good physically in a fight as they start to get, a little bit older, a little bit stiffer, but when they are on a hill, they look really intimidating. These older wolves are some of the biggest bodied animals we have in the pack. A big adult male can weigh anywhere from 135 to 150 pounds in Yellowstone. And so when they're standing on a hill, they look really, really intimidating. And they have a lot of knowledge. These older animals have been, involved in hundreds of altercations over the course of their lifetime. They know the terrain really well, inside and out. And so they know how to get their pack to safety, how to get an advantage by getting up on a hill and looking bigger, getting into a group, seeming more intimidating. They're almost like four-star generals in how to deal with enemy packs. And so we often see the young animals of the pack will actually look at these older animals like, what do we do? You'll see them physically looking at those old animals, and those old animals will assess the situation and typically make the decision whether to engage or to retreat. And we see that happen time and time again here in the park, that these old animals are really, really important for their knowledge and intelligence. And so another interesting thing that scientists have figured out about wolves, and this is going to get a little bit more complicated as we move forwards because I'm going to get into some genetics, but coat color actually plays a role in pup survival. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background here. Prior to about 12,000 years ago, all gray wolves, Canis lupus, were some variation of gray, whether it was the reddish tawny color in the south, all the way to the bright white coat colors of the Arctic. They were all gray. And we can kind of blame it on our domestic dogs. So all modern day dogs, of course, are the descendants of wolves. The most recent domestication of wolves started happening about 35,000 years ago. And as humans began to travel across the Northern Hemisphere, they brought those domesticated dogs with them. Now, along the way, a mutation occurred in the dog line. This mutated gene is typically what causes yellow dogs to be yellow in color, and it is involved in immunity. When humans came across, of course, the land bridge to North America, that mutated gene got into the wild wolf population when humans started crossbreeding their dogs to wolves to create a larger wolf cross to hunt with and protect themselves, etc. So this mutated gene gets into the wild wolf population. And this gene that typically makes yellow dogs yellow, when it shows up in wolves, it actually presents itself as a black coat color. It is in a group of genes called the B defensives, and it is involved in immunity. And so you would think that over time, if it's involved in immunity, that you would start to see more black wolves than gray colored wolves over time. But we haven't. 25 years later, we still have 50% black colored wolves and 50% gray colored wolves. And so scientists wanted to figure out why. And Kira, my friend, one of our wolf biologists, of course, started digging. And I'm going to explain what she found out. So there's a few prominent diseases that can get into our wild wolf herds here, wolf packs here. Many of those diseases we actually, of course, vaccinate our modern day dogs against, like parvovirus. But the canine distemper virus is incredibly dangerous, especially for wolf pups. Most wolves have developed not an immunity per se, but they are, of course, developing what we believe is a little bit more immunity against parvovirus over time. Most wolves in the park are positive for it by the time they're a year old, but it doesn't seem to kill them. But in the case of canine distemper virus, which this graph represents, canine distemper virus is almost impossible for wolves to develop immunity against because it's kind of like our flu virus that shows up every winter. Every time it shows up, it's a little bit different strain. And so it makes it very difficult for these wolves to develop immunity. So when it shows up, which are represented by kind of those bright orange or reddish circles on your screen, it is almost a complete wipeout of our puppies that year. dropping our pup survival rate anywhere from, 80% survival down to 20% or 0 in some packs, with the only puppies in the pack that tend to survive a canine distemper year tend to be black. Or they live in a pack that is in the very most remote parts of Yellowstone that don't come into contact with other packs very often, and therefore their disease transmission rate is lower. But black puppies tend to survive the intense disease years. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how that all plays out. So black puppies are surviving the disease years, and coat color not only plays a role in who will survive, but it plays a role in pup production as well. So who raised you actually matters. A gray colored female doesn't have the mutated gene, so her body is basically a puppy maker. She is designed to have large litters, and she's got a lot more resources because her body's not distracted by every little cold that comes along. Her body is designed to raise pups. A black colored female, although they're really good mamas, they're just as fierce, her body, because she has the mutated gene, is constantly kind of focusing energy on immune defense and defending her body against whatever cold is showing up that year. So over time, what that basically means, and what they've discovered here in the park, is that gray colored females without the mutation tend to have larger pup litters. And not only do they have larger pup litters because they're just basically physically more adapted to being able to produce pups and raise them successfully. But one other thing plays into that really, really strongly. Size of the body matters as well. So the curvy girls win. The curvier, the better. If these big gray females also have a lot of body fat, they're going to have a lot more physical reserves to give to their pups, and that will also increase a pup's chance of survival. Pack size matters too, as we mentioned earlier, right? If you have more members in your pack, you're going to be able to defend your territory and defend your resources. But the number of wolves in your pack seems to be really important for successfully raising puppies. 8 wolves seems to be the magic number here in Yellowstone for a pack to succeed. You need a few babysitters to stay back with the puppies each day when the rest of the pack goes off to hunt. You need typically four wolves to hunt elk really successfully. You need a couple runners. You need some to be able to grab on, and then you need one big animal in your pack, not only to help defend your territory, but also to make that kill grab, to physically take down an elk so that they can basically support pups each year. So 8 is the magic number for most of our packs here in the park. So we mentioned earlier that old wolves matter as well, not only in defense of your pack, but older females are going to have more experience in raising young. They have been around the block a few times. They know when and where to find the food in their territory, and they can respond a lot better to changes in the habitat. And they, of course, don't have the mutation. And so if you are a big, older gray female, you are also going to have much more reserves to give to your pups, and they're going to be better equipped for getting those puppies through those disease years when they occur. So, in short, all of that jargon on the screen, I'm not going to go into all of it. I'm going to just summarize it for you, and just bear in mind that this is something that they're continuing to do research on, but this is what we know so far. Your best chance of survival during a disease year is to meet these parameters. You need to be a black puppy, right? Born to a big, older gray female that lives in a pack of 8 wolves and has 1 large male to help defend the territory. This is the reason why we are not seeing more black-colored wolves than gray-colored wolves over time. These big gray females with their large litter sizes are offsetting the pup survival during a disease year. These big gray females with these large litters are offsetting the little black puppies that survive during the disease year. So now that I've blown your mind, yep.
I hate to break in here. I am so sorry. We are out of time. And
Oh, I was at 19 minutes. Oh, okay.
yeah,
I guess I hit it wrong.
yep. Sorry about that. We are due at 11:15 and we need to move on, but this is so packed full of amazing information.
Sorry, I must have taken longer than I thought.
That's okay. That's okay. Just amazing stuff. And I think we're all a little bit envious of the work that you do. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.